Hello YouTube, my name is the Beast Dispenser, and today we're going to be going over how to create a somewhat advanced login system in Visual Studio that makes use of a local database that we will be creating from scratch. Now, as a disclaimer, everything will be in the description, including the links to the software that we'll be downloading, as well as some source code so that you guys can more easily follow along. And so before we get started, we're going to do the downloads. So the first thing you want to do is make sure that you have Visual Studio installed. Now, I have linked the page to get the free one. You don't need to get the Enterprise or anything, just get a free version. It will take a while if you don't already have it, so allow some time for it to download. It takes like, sometimes a half hour, maybe even longer, so yeah, make sure you go ahead and get that downloaded. So we're going to go ahead and move on to the next thing, which is called XAMPP. Now this is something that lets you host a local website and a server. Sorry, hang on. This is how we're going to be creating our database. It has a lot of things built in and it will make our lives very easy. So just go ahead and download it for the system that you're on. I'm on Windows, so I downloaded the Windows one. And now the last thing you're going to want to download is this connector. And now this will allow us to talk to our database that we create inside of Visual Studio. So just go ahead and click on this download button down here. If you need to change your operating system, then feel free to. But the thing you just need to do is get all these downloaded and installed. It might take a little while to get all of these. These two are relatively small, I think, so it shouldn't take you very long. The big one is the Visual Studio. But once you get all those installed, just come back to the video and we'll get started on the Visual Studio code and the database creation. So you'll know XAMPP is installed correctly because in your C drive you will have a folder called XAMPP. And now this is just directly, you don't have to go into any folders to find it. It should just be right there on your C drive. And inside of it there is a exam control.exe, and you're going to want to run this. I already have it open, so I'm not going to open it. I will pull it to the side here. So there we go. When you open it for the first time, it'll look like this. Nothing will be on. It might look a little confusing, but the only thing you really need to worry about is starting these two things. More importantly, the MySQL. And once you start them, you're just going to want to click on this admin button on the MySQL. And this will open, I already have one open. This will open up the PHP MyAdmin page. And if you don't know what that is, it's just a cool thing that lets you create the database and everything. So you don't need to know the in-depths too much, but just know that when you click on admin, this page will open up. And you will see a little error down here. This is just complaining that there's no password set to the root, which is the privileged account of this. So you may want to look into getting this changed. However, I am not going to worry about it. There's plenty of things on Google to help you get this figured out. The first thing we're going to do is, you can see I did this before. Didn't like the quality of it, so I'm doing it again. I'm actually going to see if I can delete this table. That way I can just use it again. So we're going to go ahead and click on New. And this was where you create a new database. So I'm going to call mine YouTube. And you can ignore this collation. And you can also ignore, there's going to be a lot of built-in tables here. And that's just how XAMPP is storing some information. So you can just ignore this. But so you're going to want to name your database. And then you're going to click Create. Oh, okay, it says it exists already, so I'm just going to change the name of it and call it YouTube Database. So a little bit confusing for me, but don't worry about it. That shouldn't happen to you. So now we're inside of the database that we just created, and it's wanting us to create a table. So we're going to go ahead and create a table. This is going to be a users table. This is where we're going to store the login information for each individual user. And the number of columns seems to be defaulting to 4, but we're only going to need 3. We're going to need 1 for ID, 1 for username, and 1 for password. So we're just going to make sure your information looks similar to this. The name doesn't ultimately matter. You'll just have to adapt your code later to adjust for this. So now we're going to go ahead and say ID for the name, and I auto-filled for me because I've done this before. But you really just type ID or user ID or something along those lines. It's up to personal preference on this one. And now we're going to go all the way to the right here to AI, and this stands for auto increment in this situation, and you're just going to check that box. As soon as you check that box, this will come up, and all you're going to want to do is press go, and that'll work. So the next field we're going to type is username. I'm doing it in all caps, but it really doesn't matter. And we're going to change this type to varchar, and then we're going to set the length to 16. Now this is really up to you how long you want to make it. In this instance, I believe it's a 1-to-1 ratio, so one character is one length value. So this would allow for 16 characters. It is up to you. You can make it bigger, you can make it smaller, it's really up to you. And then that's all we need to do for this row. So now we're going to come down here and we're just going to type in password. Now, we are not going to be storing the password in plain text. We're actually going to encrypt that password when we do the code. So we're actually going to need to allow for quite a bit of room. So I like to default it to 255 here. So once again, we're going to be storing a password, but it's not going to be the plain text. And let's say the user put password as their password. The value in here will not be password. It will be a undecipherable hash. So we're going to save this, and there should be no errors if you did everything exactly how I did. You'll notice the auto increment is here showing, and it filled in the length and everything for us. So this should be it. We don't really need to interact with this anymore, so I'm just going to minimize it, and we're going to move on to Visual Studio. Okay, so now we're in Visual Studio, and I'm going to create a new project. We're going to do this inside of Visual C#. I'm sure you can do this easily within Visual Basic. However, the connector that we're using works really well with Visual C. So we're just going to do a Windows Form application, and then we're going to name it Database, and then I'll do YouTube. I think I already have YouTube Database, so I'm just swapping it. This is the problem with doing multiple recordings of the same tutorial. So I'm just going to let it load here. And the very first thing we're going to want to do is add that connector to our project. So on the right here under Solution Explorer, if you don't have this, I believe you can pull it up under the View and right there. So if you don't have the Solution Explorer, just make sure you open that up, and you'll find the reference section here, and you're going to want to right click on this and click Add. And if you installed that connector properly under the extensions, you're going to want to scroll down and you should be able to find the MySQL data. And for me, there are two of them for some reason. I think that might just be standard. So go ahead and just check the first one. I always check the first one and it's worked out for me. So I'm sure the second one does work, but I'll leave that up to you. So press OK and it should add it, and we don't need to worry about that anymore. So now the MySQL reference has been added, and now we're just going to make the form look nice. So the very first thing I like to do is make sure that my properties list here is alphabetized. It usually starts off like categorized, but alphabetized is just a little bit nicer because you can find things in alphabetical order. And the very first thing I always do is turn off this ugly icon that shows up in the top left. And then I make the start position center screen, or else it just shows up in random places. And then I change the text to login. And now we're going to add two labels, which I just click here and I can do this. And this is going to say username. And I apologize if you can hear my keyboard. I have a mechanical keyboard, so it's pretty loud. And then we're going to type in password for the second label. Okay. And now we need two text boxes. And this is basic form creation. If you haven't done this before, then just take a moment to play around with Visual Studio. It's very easy and quick to learn, and you may even need to reference some other tutorials on the basics of Visual Studio, as I will be moving kind of quickly through the creation of the form, as it is kind of the more boring part of the entire project. So now that we have the two text boxes and the labels, we're going to need buttons. So this will be a login button. And okay, I'm just going to type button because there we go. Sorry. And this will be, we'll switch it up. This will say new user question mark, and then this will say cancel, because I always like to include a cancel button, and I always make the cancel button smaller because it would suck to accidentally click that and lose your progress on what you were doing, so I like to make it smaller to make it harder to click on. So now that we've created the form for the login, I want to go ahead and take a moment to create the form for the register, because we are going to be doing the register. So go ahead and click on that project button and then click on add new item, and there's going to be the Windows form option, and we actually have the ability to rename this one. So I'm going to name it register.cs. We're going to add this. So this form is going to be very similar to the first form. It's just going to have one extra text box. So I'm going to actually just copy this to save some time and do some realigning and resizing, and we will drag these down a bit, and we will copy and paste. So if you have registered with any websites before, you might have run into a situation, confirmation, where you needed to type your password in twice, and that is what I'm enforcing here as well. It's just nice because I've made the mistake before of typing in the wrong password, and then you start off your new account with having to change your password because you accidentally mistyped it, and that's no fun. So I'm just making the changes that I made the first time, setting it to center, getting rid of the icon. And there's other stuff I could do, like making it to where you can't resize the window, but that doesn't really matter all that much. So now we have the look correct. Actually, no we don't. This needs to say register. Oops. Now it's off my text. Where's the text? There's the text. Okay, now it is correct. So now what we're going to do, we're actually going to create the register code first. It makes more sense to create the register before, or to create the user before trying to log in as the user, so that's how I want to create the project. So first, you just want to double click on the register button. For me, it's button 1.click is what it gets assigned to, and I have code pre-prepared, so I'm going to be referencing it just to make sure I'm not making any mistakes here. So I have it open on the left here. Okay, so we're actually going to need to do several things here. We're going to make sure that the text boxes are not empty and that the two password text boxes are the same. And then we're also going to encrypt the password, and then we're going to connect to the database and insert that new entry. So this will be a little bit of SQL, some basic if statements, and then a small thing on encryption. I personally don't actually know a whole lot about encryption. This is just something that I was able to find online and implement for my own uses. So first we're going to start with that if statement, and I'm going to go ahead and type it out so that I can explain it easier. So if not, which is what that exclamation point means, if not the first text box, which in this case is the username field, so if the textbox1.text equals nothing, so if not that, so if it's not empty is what that is saying. And we're going to do the not again, text box 2, which is the first password. We're going to make, this is making sure that the second text box is not empty. So they're the same checks with two different text boxes. That's a mouthful. And then we're going to make sure that the two password text boxes equal each other. So in the end, this is what we need to do. Okay, yeah, so in the end, we're making sure that these two text boxes are not empty, and we're making sure that these two text boxes are the same. And if this check passes, then we know we're good to continue with inserting the user into the database. So the immediate next thing we're going to do is encrypt the password. And I'm just going to go ahead and copy and paste, and I'm going to leave it in the description for you to copy and paste, or you can pause the video and type, whatever you really feel like doing. I know when I watch tutorials I like to type. So this is all the code. It's not a big block of code, but it can be a little complex, and like I said, I'm not too familiar with it myself, but I know how to use it and I will work off of it. So just make sure you have this typed in, and this will encrypt the password to be a SHA-256 hash, and this type of hash cannot be deciphered, so it is a one-way encryption, so that it is very secure, and if some hacker were to see this password, it doesn't automatically mean that they know the user's password. So it's very good to use, and it's not overly hard to use. So you'll notice these errors, and this is just because it's using things that I'm not referencing, so all you have to do is highlight over it. I think it just did it. No, it didn't. Where'd the errors go? Hang on. There it is. I don't know what just happened there. So hover over the error and then click on Show Potential Fixes, and then just click on Using System.security.cryptography. And that'll import the appropriate reference, and there should be no error. So this will encrypt the password, and if you're curious at this point or confused, the encrypted password can be got like this. So this is the encrypted password. So like this string builder object is what stores that password, and this is how we reference that password. And we'll be using that in just a few moments here. But the next thing we're going to do is connect to the database. So this is where we actually get to interact with the database, and there is a connection string you need to make first. So this is the details of the database. Sorry. This is the details of the database that you're going to pass in, and just follow the format that I give and it should work out. So what it wants here is the IP address or the location of your server. So if it's local, then you're going to do this. That is what you need to enter for that, followed by a semicolon. If you're using an external server with the database, then you will need to contact that or find the config file of that and insert the IP address that it's given. The next thing you need to enter is the port, and I'll show you how to find this. So open up XAMPP again. You should have it open for this whole time. It needs to be running for the server to be running, so just unminimize it or reopen it if you have closed it at this point. And next to the admin button, there's a config button, and this will have a my.ini, and then this will just tell you what the port is. So this is what you need to put in for that port. You don't need to worry about the socket or the password for right now. So port 3306, semicolon. And now for the username, and this is where you can make your own changes. I'm just going to log in as the root, which, like I said earlier, doesn't even have a password associated to it right now. You can create your own user on your database that has its own permissions and is maybe more secure than just the root. So, but for this example and just for this little demonstration, I'm just going to use root, and the password is nothing. So you say equal nothing and use semicolon. And now the last thing we enter is database, and we do database equals the database that you created. So I believe I named mine YouTube database. And let me double check that by opening up the PHP website, and yeah, YouTube database, and then semicolon. Now that is all for the connection string, and now we're going to need two more strings. And these are going to be the queries that we actually pass into the database to do things. So this first one's going to be responsible for inserting the user that we from the text boxes. So it's going to be insert into users. And if you don't know, this is SQL code. And if you're unfamiliar with SQL, then you may want to look into just some basic SQL syntax. But I'm going to provide everything, so don't you really worry about it too much. I'm making a lot of spelling mistakes here, sorry. So insert into the table users with the fields ID, username, password, and then pass in the values. Null for the ID, because the ID is auto-incrementing anyways, so if you leave it null, it'll just auto-increment like it should. And now I'm just going to put two little quotations as a placeholder, and the first one's username, so this is going to be textbox1, and then the second one is the encrypted password. So to do this, we're going to need to actually exit out of the quotation. We're going to do a quotation, and then we're going to do plus textbox1 dot text plus another quotation. And we'll need to do that again, but with the sb.toString. So I'm going to add the two quotations, the two pluses, and then sb.toString. And then that is the insert query. And now we're going to do one more query, and this is just something I chose to do. This isn't something you have to do. So we're going to do query 2, and this is going to do a select statement. So this is going to find the user we just inserted, and this is just so that I am 100% certain that this insert statement worked. So this is something you do not have to do, but I do it. So just keep that in mind if you're following along. And what I'm doing here is saying find me all users where the username is equal to textbox1 and password is equal to, and you have to do all the annoying quotations and stuff, sb.toString. So it's a little tedious to do, but it is a good check to make. So this makes sure that the insert was run successfully and you got the result that you expected. So those are just the strings. Those won't do anything on their own. So we actually need to start making the objects that that connector thing that we downloaded actually gives us. So you're going to type in MySQL connection, and then you can name this whatever. I have pre-built code, so I'm just going to follow it kind of exactly. And if I go too fast, just pause or copy the code in the description. So that is that line, and at this point you'll notice the error, and you'll just need to do that using import again. So, and you shouldn't have any more import errors on this form from here on out. So you'll need to do a MySQL command, and this is going to be the insert command. So I'll just say insert command, and then my new MySQL command, and we're going to pass in the first query and the connection that we made. And then we'll do this one more time, and this is setting up the check that we're going to be doing, and I'll just name it check command equals new MySQL command. We're going to pass in the second query and then database connection. So if you're getting lost at this point, if you're confused, if this doesn't make any sense, then I'll try and explain it really quick in a little bit more detail. Well, let me finish typing the code and I'll go back through and try to explain it. But hopefully it's making a little bit of sense here. So we're going to make one more thing. Whoops, okay, command. Oh, I named it something different. Okay, insert database, insert command. Yes, I believe this is right. Dot command timeout. Okay, equals 60. And this will make it to where it will time out, and it won't just have us sit here forever waiting for it to time out if it's going to time out. The last object we're going to make is the reader, and this is what stores the result of the SQL command that we will run. So now we're going to get into a try, and when I finish the try statement, I will explain the code. So we're just going to finish the code and then I'll explain it, okay? Just try and follow along, and there should be no errors, and it should work out for you. So we're going to go ahead and make a generic try statement here. If I can spell correctly, exception x, there we go. Sorry about that. And I like to format mine like this. If you haven't done, sorry, I just hit the mic there. If you haven't done a try and catch before, just format it like this, and this will make it to where the program doesn't crash completely if there is an error. So do try, and now we're going to open the database connection. So we're going to actually connect to the database now. And now we're going to set the reader, which, as I said earlier, stores the result of running a query. So we're going to run the first command, and I think it's execute, what is it, reader, I believe? Yes, okay. So this line will actually run that first query. So after this line is executed, that user has been inserted. So now we're just going to close the reader, because when you insert a user, there is no value that gets returned, which is why we're going to execute that second query, and we want to make sure that it ran successfully. So we're going to say reader equals, and then we're going to do the check command dot execute reader. And now this will have a result if it ran correctly. So we want to do an if statement if the reader has rows. If the reader is storing any result, is what that means really. And then this means if there is a result, it means that the user was found. So we know the user was successfully created at this point. So we're just going to say you have been registered. If it didn't find something, that probably means that there was an SQL error that on your part, like this, because if there is a real error, then it will go down here. But if you just formatted your SQL incorrectly, that probably means that if you formatted your SQL code incorrectly, then the user would not have been inserted correctly, and you will get to this point. So a lot of the times, you will never get here, but I like to include it just for a little bit more robustness. But that's really all you need to do. And then inside the catch statement, you'll just want to do one more message box, and this is just going to show the error. So it's just ex.toString, and this is almost it. So let me explain this code real quick. So first we define the connection string, and this is just saying, this is my database, this is where it is, this is the username I want you to log into. The first query is, okay, insert into this table this new user with the textbox1.text as the username and the encrypted password as the password. The second query is a find all the users where the username and the password equal textbox1 and sp.toString. I then start creating the objects to actually connect to my database and execute those commands. So query 1 got assigned to the insert command variable, and query 2 got assigned to the check command variable, or the object, I should say. And then I set a timeout, and I should actually probably set another timeout on the check command because I'm running two different things, so they will have two different timeouts. I then create a reader object to catch all of the results that I get from executing those commands. Now, at this point, we're inside of a try because we're actually going to start interacting with the database, and if something goes wrong, I don't want to crash the entire program. So we're first going to open the connection with the database. This is required, or else you can't do anything. Like these cannot happen if you do not open the database first. I will then set the reader equal to the insert command, which, like I said before, the insert command does not actually return anything upon completion, so the reader will be actually empty no matter what. So knowing this, I just go ahead and close it, and I do a new check, which is the select all users thing. And this should have one result. It should only have one result. If you have more than one result, then something's gone wrong, or you have a duplicate username and password in the database, and you could probably do your own checks for that. I'm just choosing not to. It's probably better practice to do a check for that, because then it would avoid for duplicate. But for right now, just for basics, we're going to go with this. So we know it will have rows. We know it will have a result. So we say, if it does, you have been registered. If it does not, you probably messed up. The user can't really mess up to get to this point. So that is the code for the register in a nutshell. The only thing you really need to do on register is get rid of this text box here, move this cancel over, go into the cancel, and then just type in this.close, and that makes the cancel button actually function properly. So we can go ahead and run this. Let me make sure. So the form 1 doesn't actually do anything. It doesn't even open the register right now. So inside form 1, go to new user and double click on that. And to have a form show itself is different than it is in Visual Basic. It's 2 lines of code instead of 1. So what you're going to want to do is type in register r equals new register parentheses, and then you can do r.show. In Visual Basic, you can just do r.show. So just do that, and now clicking on the new user button will open the register. So go ahead and run it for the first time, and click on that new user, and everything should open up center if you did the center screen starting position. And now for username, I'm just going to do test. For a password, I'm going to do T and T. And we'll go back in and make these asterisks in a minute. But for now, I just want to register. So it has inserted and it found the user inside the database. So it says you have been registered. And if we go down here to the website and click on the left here, the YouTube database that I created, and click on the users table, you will see that the test has been inserted and that T has been encrypted to this hash here. So this did work. This worked 100%. And now we can move on to logging in. And logging in is actually simpler than registering. But first, it's going to bother me. So back in register, I'm going to select both of these text boxes, and then on the properties here, you'll see password char, and you just want to put an asterisk in there. And now all those letters will show up as asterisks. So the register form is done, unless you can make your own personal changes to it, but it is done. So now we're going to go ahead and go into the login, and this is going to be very similar, and it's going to be easier. So the first thing we're going to want to do is we're not even going to bother with those text box checks this time. We don't really need to, because what we'll do is basically going to make up for it anyways. So we're going to need to do that connection string again. We need to do, every time we want to do something to the database inside of a method, we'll have to connect to it, and this is secure to actually do it this way. Because you don't want the database connection to always be open, because then it would be more susceptible to a hacker. So I'm just going to enter in the same thing. I could copy and paste, but if I type it along, it might be easier for you guys to follow along here. And also, hopefully I don't make any mistakes here. And this was YouTube database. Okay, and now we're going to encrypt the password. So I'm actually just going to copy and paste it again. And once again, it's just that same encryption. So the reason we encrypt it here is because we are going to encrypt the password they give us, and we're going to compare it to the database. If the two encrypted passwords are the same, then we found the user, hurrah. So we'll need to encrypt it like usual, and then we need to redo the MySQL objects that we created earlier. So it's a little bit tedious, but it's not too bad. And if you're doing more advanced things, you could create functions that do this for you. And maybe if I do a new tutorial, I'll show you how, what I mean. I'm thinking about doing a tutorial to show you guys how to display and edit a database in like a list box or something. So I'm just gonna kind of copy and paste from the code I have on the left screen here. You can't actually see it, but oh well. Okay, so the difference here, and I'll keep it consistent actually. In the code I have on the left, I have the query in plain text, but I'll go ahead and just be consistent here. So this is going to be the query. We're going to go ahead and put it up here, and this is just going to be a select statement. So we're going to select star, which means select everything from the table users, where the username, if I can type, okay, username equals, and make sure you have the two single ticks, and then inside those single ticks, you'll need to escape the string and enter text box 1. So if username equals text box 1 and password equals, and then I actually made a small mistake here, and it's just the location of my code. So this is going to be sb.toString, but because I'm trying to reference it before it's created, it's going to error out. So I actually need to take this code and put it below the string builder code. Okay. And now this will work. Oh boy, there you go. Let me retype this. Okay, there we go. I probably just typed it wrong. Okay. So this is the query we're going to type. Not too strange. Oh, and I forgot. No, I didn't. Okay. Sorry, getting ahead of myself here. Okay, so inside of this command database, we're going to pass in query, and we're going to pass in that database the connection string. Yes. Okay. No, we're not. We're going to pass in the database connection. Sorry. And now we're going to give the command database timeout, the command timeout equal to 60 again. This is just good practice to make sure you're not sitting there waiting forever. And now we're going to make that reader again. Okay. And now, again, this will be very familiar. We're going to make that try and catch statement again. Okay. Okay, and this will be a little bit shorter. So we're going to open that connection again, that database connection. So .open, and we're going to do reader equals command database dot execute reader. And now we'll just do if reader has rows message box dot show logged in, else user not found, or you can put really just the information they passed in was not correct, so this is what displays. And then we'll do one more message box like before, and this is just the ex dot to string. And believe it or not, this is basically it. So I'll explain it one more time. So we're going to connect to the database, we're going to encrypt the password, and we are going to look inside of the database for any users where the username and password are equal to what was passed in the text boxes. We are then going to open the database, run that select statement, and if we get any result, if we get any users back, we know that we found the user and we can log them in. And in this case, we're just doing the message box.show. If we didn't find anything, then we didn't find them. And if there was an error, then we print the error. And let me just go back in here, make sure the cancel works. So the cancel will be this.close again. And the user I know works. So this should work. So let me go ahead and run it. And the username is going to be test. The password is going to be the letter T, login. Logged in. So there you go. We have successfully created from scratch the login and register system for Visual Studio, and we have made use of a local server, SQL server. I really hope you guys learned something. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, if you're having any problems, just put a comment below. And if you like the video, then please give me a thumbs up. It lets me know that I'm, on the right track. I do have plans of making one more video based on this logic. It will include a list view that contains the contents of a table, and it'll allow you to insert and delete. And then, so if you guys want that, just let me know. It's not too hard to create. I'll probably just work off of this login that I already have. So yeah, I hope you guys have a good day, and I'll see you guys later.